we're live. Hello. Hey, everyone. We're live again. It is January 16th, and I'm here with Adam from The Witchy Show again. Can't hear you.
Oops. I thought it would unmute me. It usually unmutes me when it's done playing its little intro thing.
I think it's because you muted yourself before it tried to mute you. So, yeah.
Well, this device is just full of privilege.
Yeah, it is, right? Hey, Shadow Sun. Hey, Amelia. We already have people watching and in chat. So today it was going to be an interview, but I am still unprepared for that. So we're doing a Q&A, ask us anything for an hour. Ask us anything for an hour. Yay, I'm so glad you caught it live too, Shadow Sun. Yay, nice to see you. So we're taking questions, but since people are just sort of gathering in, I figured we'd go to some questions that I have been getting in my emails. And I've already responded to the individuals that sent me the messages, personal emails. But I think some of the questions that they have would be interesting to have a discussion about. And the questions I've been getting are all about deity. So I guess deity seems to be a big thought or a big topic that people are thinking about right now in their, in their own practice. So let me see if I can find the questions. So, okay. So I guess the first, actually, why don't we start out with how do you, Adam, perceive deity? How do you think of deity? How do you experience deity? How do you perceive it? What is your perception? What is deity in your experience, in your beliefs?
Deity is like God. It's like this entity that is above everything. It's above you. It's above everything. It can manifest things, it can take things away, but deity is different from what like a Christian would define it, for me at least. It's this guiding force. Like the Morrigan isn't an entity that is like flesh and blood. Maybe in mythical times she was, but these days she's a spiritual energy that fills the room in a way that 1,000 spirits couldn't even fill it, in a way that even some of the kings of demons that I work with couldn't fill it. So it's a form of energy that fills the room, fills the space, fills me with its presence, essentially. That's how I have experienced it.
But do you see deity as a personified entity? Do you see deities like the gods? Are they all the one god? Are they different individual personalities? Are they just an energy? Are they, do you know what
I think it all comes from the same cosmic soup, but I think they're, at least the way I've experienced it with working with the saints, is that the saints are a different type of energy, the way they feel, and the Morrigan is also a different type of energy, and the demons are a different type of energy. So it's, I think in the end, they all come from the same cosmic soup, but it's the way that I experience them or have experienced them is they're different. It's not that like they have personalities, but it's not like how me or you have a personality. It's like, it's all energy. That's all you're really feeling, is this energy that we give form to through our minds. Like, how that old saying, like how enough people think in some, or how if enough people believe in a rumor, it starts to become true, or something like that. What is that golem thing? There's a clay golem thing where enough people believe that this golem was alive, and it was alive, essentially. I can't remember what that's called, but it's essentially where enough people have thought of, say, for example, the Morrigan, she looks this way, or she behaves this way, or she interacts with you this way. But for me, it's all been different because it's just energy that's interacting with my own energy. Like, I don't really know how to explain it.
So do you think then, if deity is an energy, do you think within that deity energy is, the Morrigan the same as Hecate, the same as Athena, the same as Isis? Are they all the same energy? Or is deity energy even different when we start breaking it down by, the Morgan or Thor or Athena or Isis or blah, blah, blah?
I think that comes down to the individual witch and their practice, but for me, they would all be different energies. Like, I have reached out to Hecate before, a long time ago, and I can remember her energy being vastly different than the Morrigan's. Her energy was very dark and very like it. When it fills the room, it feels like all the lights in the room go out. When the Morrigan fills the room, it feels like there's a sense of justice and there's a sense of things moving in the direction that you want it to. And it feels like your obstacles are just being knocked down, and it feels like your confidence level is rising. When Boone enters the room, it's like, it feels like it's fun and games, but you can also hear the jingling of money and you feel like you're going to be financially secure. The same thing with Clonic. So they kind of feel the same, but with Clonic, his energy is more, I will cut everything down to rebuild the situation the way that I think it should be done. So all of their energies are very different, but I think if we could trace it all the way back, it would go down to the same cosmic soup that all life comes from.
Well, then how do you, then how do you figure out what is deity energy and what is not deity energy?
For me, it's the sense of the energy in the room. So like I said, the Morrigan fills the whole room, whereas if I'm working with just the spirits, I can feel the spirits around me, but not the entire room. That's how I've come to decipher.
So deity energy fills the room?
Yeah.
So then, like, demon energy doesn't fill the room.
That's different, at least in my experience. So right. When I call on Boone, and when I first called on Boone, he would come with his legions because they want to figure out like who you are, what do you want, like why are you calling us, essentially. And so their presence starts to fill up the room. But after a time of working with Boone, it's not like he fills up the whole room. He might fill up a space in the entire room, but not the entire room. And when you go into said space, like, there's a chair that I will sit in that I usually sit in when I'm recording videos where I'm talking to you guys. And it's a big red chair. And sometimes when I'm sitting there, I can feel his presence and it's like enveloping everything in that particular space. Whereas if I called on a spirit, they would only envelop, the energy might feel like it's beside me instead of all around me. When I call on the Morrigan, the entire room, you can't go anywhere in the room without feeling her energy. So that's like how it feels for me.
So deity, I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to, comprehend. So deity, if the room starts filling with energy for you, the first consideration is that it's deity. And then from there, you would have to then discern which deity it might be.
No, I get told. So that's
okay.
So I always get told, like, if the spirits pop in, I instantly know, okay, the spirits are here and what do they want? And they'll instantly tell me. If Boone pops in, I can instantly know that it's him because he'll usually say something. If the Morrigan flies through, it's like the entire room fills with energy as she goes through, and then the energy dissipates because she's usually only here for a couple of minutes.
What if it's a deity that you haven't met yet? Or what if you're just beginning a relationship with a deity?
So when I began a relationship with Ashtaroth at the beginning, when he had reached out to me, I had made sure that I myself was on the astral plane. I could feel a sense of wanting, like I was told to reach out to him, and I could feel an impending sense of him throughout the day. And when I had gone to the astral plane, he had filled up the entire space. It was a white, brilliant light that just filled up the entire space. It was exhausting. So when it's other entities that I don't know, like, sometimes if I'm talking to another witch, their entities will come over to investigate, and it is a exhausting, draining kind of, I don't know what this energy is, and my first instinct is to throw up wards, but I will also sometimes, not all the time, get a sense of it's another presence. And if it is another presence, I don't want to offend them by throwing up wards, but I will sometimes do that anyways because the energy is too intense sometimes.
So I don't know. Are you saying then that when there's a different presence other than the ones that you work with, deity or whatever, it's difficult for you to tell whether it's deity or spirits or whatever because it's a foreign energy.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. I was just trying to, because in the questions that I had received in the emails, it was more of like, how do I know, or how do I approach deity? How did the person asking me the questions wanted to know how I knew who it was that the deities that approached me, or how did I find my matron and patrons and experiences, and that's what I was trying to get.
It took me years to find these. It took me, because if you guys remember when I started on the Witches Show, I didn't have Deity, right? Like it wasn't until maybe a couple of years in that I started working with the saints, and after the saints it was the spirits, right? It's always been the spirits, but after that it was the Morrigan and Ashtaroth. So it's draining, and that's why I usually have a crystal with me. There's a video coming where I talk about my crystals, but one of them is a smoky quartz crystal that I've talked about before that helps to ground me and keep me on the physical plane, because their energy, to me, it just feels like I'm being pulled in 1,000 directions and I'm being pulled off the physical plane when I'm meeting a new entity.
Okay. So yeah, Makey Adam says, yes, I know what you mean by the energy filling the room. I work with Sarah Dwin, and her energy is all around the room, but also almost a feeling like static electricity. And Amelia says Lucifer has a current energy like Azazel. Definitely not the same. Also encourage positive ideas and different perspectives.
It's I think it's pronounced Azazel.
Azazel. Okay. And question for you. Does Boone leave residual energy that you feel hours later?
So when I first started working with him and Belith definitely will. When I started working with Boone would stick around. So usually when I work with demons, depending on what I'm asking of them, it's either they will stay at the altar working that particular candle or whatever spell it is that I've got going on. And it's not like they're standing there putting their hands over it. It's usually they're just standing there. So they will sometimes stick around, but if they're the type that's like, okay, I see that you want me to bless this, I've blessed this, I'm moving on, their energy will stick around for maybe an hour or so, and then it will leave, but it usually confines itself to one particular space, like the altar, unless, of course, Boone is deciding that he just wants to hang out.
All right. So another thing I was asked, I don't know why this particular.
Wait, what about your answers?
About what?
About deity and how you define deity and how you feel deity.
Oh, okay. So deity, as I perceive it, is a frequency, sort of like what Adam was saying, of energy. Deity is the purest, the highest vibrational frequency that we experience on the physical plane. It's like pure energy. It's purer. There is less there's less disharmony within the energy frequency. I definitely understand what you mean by feeling as if it fills the room, but it's not heavy in my perspective and how I feel it. It's pure. The only way I can.
Do you work with Jesus? Because Jesus is the only one that's pure.
No, but not pure as in good or bad. Okay,
just pure energy.
What I mean by, like, for example, and this is like a concrete example. Recently, in our home, we have purchased air purifiers, right? Because where we're living here in Washington, it's very rainy, very damp. So we have dehumidifiers running, but we are also purchasing air purifiers. So we're getting the humidity out of the air, but we're also purifying the air from any mold or other.
Was Massachusetts dry in comparison to Seattle?
In comparison, yes, but it's Massachusetts can be humid, but here it's only humid in the winter, but during the summer it's very comfortable.
Yeah,
The air is very different. So for me, walking into a room that has been dehumidified and the air has been purified has a very similar sensation energetically as deity. Okay. When I experience other entities or thought forms or beloved dead or the ancestors or spirits that once were physical, it's a different feeling. Angels feel different. Angelic entities feel different than deity. Deity never was in itself physical. I believe that what we experience, like the Morgan and Danu and Isis and Bast and Thoth and Anubis and Athena and Thor and Loki, all those are deities, but they're human understandings of aspects of this energy, this deity. I do believe some of them, some of the gods have been man-made as opposed to like god forms.
I think
like,
all the pagan gods were man-made. I mean, to be honest, we all needed before this concept of God came about. I think we all needed a reason to explain the thunder, the darkness, the rain, the wind, and all, and like the bright light we saw in the sky overhead one night, right? Like we needed some reason to explain that. So I do agree with that.
Yeah, I think some, like, you can the mythology of Zeus, there has been suggestions that there was a human being with some sort of abilities or talents, and then people called him a god. You know what I mean? As years go by,
it's kind of like what the Catholic Church does when they're like, "Oh, you've attained sainthood, so we're going to recognize you as a saint."
Right, exactly. So I do believe that some deities are like man-made. Doesn't make them good or bad. Again, this is not judging anything as good or bad. But I do think that we can experience, that deity energy without approaching deity through a personified image.
It's easier to relate to, like, especially if you're like a witch on YouTube. If you were talking about like the pure energy, like it might be harder to relate to. Like I know when some witches will talk about the masculine or the feminine, right, in their craft, they're like, I don't work with a specific deity, I work with the masculine or the feminine. That is hard for me to physically visualize what it is that you're working with. So if somebody were to say, I work with pure deity, which is pure energy, that would be like, I'd visualize just this ball of energy in the middle of nowhere, right? But like when I work with the spirits, what I can visualize is dead people, right? And when I work with Boone, I generally have a visualization of what he is supposed to look like, but he obviously comes to me in a different form. So I can understand where you're coming from. I think it would just be hard for some people.
Oh, I think it is. I think it can be difficult. And I think that when we encounter deity energy, we may be given an image that we can relate to as we interact with deity. So I feel like this energy may be sending images to our mind, so that we can easily relate to it and then listen and open ourselves up to that energy.
And I think at the same time, if we're going down that route, I think it's also fair to say that we're not experiencing all of Deity, because if you look at how people experience the Morrigan versus how they experience Hecate, one is clearly darker and the other one's clearly more vicious. So I think we experience aspects of Deity that chooses to show itself to us in some familiar form that we can relate to, like you were saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, in my practice in the past, I did have, a matron and patron, and I did relate to more personified images of deity and specific energetic frequencies that I needed or found very beneficial at that time. And the current time, I do not really have a personified deity that I work with, other than Mother Mary has always been the face of the feminine, the divine feminine for me since childhood. And she still has she's sort of a placeholder for the divine feminine energy right now. If I feel the need to give her a face, that's what she looks like for me at this time. But generally, I work with just that force, and I allow whatever needs to happen with that energy. I don't need at this point a specific personified image. So
I like that question.
Amelia said here, where do we draw the line of servitors created from thousands of years of people and the energies that exist before Earth? Not to sound too alien-like, Earth isn't that old. I agree, Earth isn't that old. Where do we draw the line? Okay, and that's a good question. Like, so if we're saying that deity is some deity or personified deity is, or the gods are man-made, what is the difference between that and a servitor, or that and a thought form?
I don't think anything at that point, because that would be like asking the exact same question about the Catholic Church. What's the difference between a saint and God himself? I mean, we have elevated these people to sainthood. I mean, they're not godhood, but they're sainthood. It's the same like with the Greeks when they would elevate. Well, I don't know if they actually elevated people to this, but I mean, how did we get all the other Greek gods, right? So somebody had to be elevated to be a Greek god. So I'm assuming if you have people over thousands of years putting their energy into a servitor, right? I'm assuming people are elevating that servitor to godhood. The difference where I would draw the line is if it's if it's a single person putting the energy into a servitor, because in my opinion and in my craft, I don't have enough power to create a servitor that could have the same energy as the Morrigan, like when she fills the room. The servitors that I can create can create energy for a small space around itself. I think if I had an army of witches doing this over thousands of years, then definitely we could create one that's elevated to godhood. But at that point, servitors are really just thought forms that we're putting energy into. So the more people, the more powerful. The less people, not necessarily the less powerful. It's just that it's not going to be, in my opinion, godhood, if you will. And when I say godhood, I mean deity, in terms of what we consider to be deity and how we define deity in our own crafts.
I think when we're talking about servitor, thought forms, egregores, I think they're all thoughts that have been created by a human being, but I think they all have different purposes. And this is just my opinion. So for me, a servitor is a thought form that I've created to do a certain thing. It is used to serve me, servitor. It is serving me and my will that I have programmed it for. A thought form, we create thought forms. We, being the collective human beings, we create thought forms every day. And our thought forms influence other people. I don't think it takes too much energy to create a thought form as opposed to creating a servitor.
And we can see the best example of a thought form that just played out in the United States. That is the best example of a negative thought form.
I think thought forms definitely can be can hold harmful intentions as well as positive intentions. Thought forms are just, energetic thoughts that we either consciously or unconsciously release. And, when, for example, if we walk into someone's house or apartment, their home, and they just had an argument with someone, and neither person is in the room anymore, but we walk into the room where the argument took place, we could feel the thought form still sort of floating in the air, you know? Same, and as a contrast example, there was just a wonderful celebration, someone's birthday, and everybody was happy, but no one's left in that room where the event took place. But we walk in and we all of a sudden we feel bubbly and happy. You know, we're experiencing thought forms. When we're talking about God forms, I do feel like that's a different energy. I'm sorry, before we get to God form, an egregore, you know, a particular servitor or thought form that a group creates, usually a coven, when they work together over a specific amount of time, the mind of the coven creates this egregore that holds the energies of the coven or a group that work together consistently, and it sort of becomes the like hive mind. Think of like you know, like the cyborg,
The Borg.
yes.
We will assimilate you. Resistance is futile.
Exactly. That is an egregore. You know, that is the hive mind, the group mind of the group. Now, God forms, I think, are more elevated. I do think that is when even a servitor, to become a God form, needs to then have its own consciousness. It's no longer tied to me. It is now sort of
It's sentient.
evolved. Yes. Yes. And that's, I think, over time, like like Adam suggested, you know, more than just me working with it. You know, it's gone beyond me. It's ascended. It has now become unified with all of humanity, and it's elevated.
I do think there is a way to make a god form, or to make a servitor god form as an individual witch. And the way to do that is through your generational line, right? So let's say your grandmother created a servitor, right? It was to bring her financial health. She passes down this little clay doll and says it's a servitor, and passes the energy down to you, and basically, you know, makes the servitor listen to you. I don't know how she does that. That's your family's craft. And then from there, you do the exact same thing with your child, right? So then maybe the servitor for you was used for love. Maybe for the child it's used for something else. The point that I'm getting to is that as it gets passed down, the servitor's instructions get changed, and it starts to realize that I can do money, I can do love, I can do this, I can do that. This person needed me to protect them. This person needed me to curse somebody, right? As it keeps going down, the servitor slowly gets more and more of the family's generational magic imbued into it, if you will. And over probably maybe 100 years or so, or a few generations, the servitor can essentially ascend higher, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I think there is a shifting that would really have to happen.
It might
in
end up
order for it to feel the energy to feel the same as deity. I mean,
the way that I was thinking about that is, like, let's say, for example, it gets passed down from, say, 1876 down to now, but somewhere along the line, the doll itself got broken. And so now your mother today is like, oh yeah, I just call upon this deity named whatever the names of the servitor was. And you might try to Google that in today and be like, that doesn't exist. And it turns out, if you do the research, that it used to be a servitor for your family. So the shift there would have been somewhere along the way the representation of the servitor was destroyed, but the energy and the representation of what it was, the memory of it, was not. So we were able to carry that forward and elevate it to godhood, if you will.
Would that be elevated instead to a familiar spirit as opposed to a servitor?
It might be, but it really depends upon the families, like how they define deity and how they've been working with it. So we might see it as a familiar spirit. They might see it as deity.
Yeah, well, what you're calling the Morgan, you may see as deity, and if I experienced it, I might think it's a familiar spirit. You know,
exactly.
Yeah, everything I think is subjective anyway. Yeah, so I don't know. For me, I think Deity is definitely, and I think we all can agree, deity has a definitely a different energetic feel and sensation, and we experience it differently than we do other spiritual entities, I think.
Yeah.
So those were my answers. So the next question I was going to address, and I don't know why this seems to be coming up, but I've been getting a lot of messages in regards to Baphomet or Baphomet or however you want to pronounce it.
Wait, is that the god cat? Is that the cat god thing, or is that Isis? There's a cat. It looks like a black cat.
Anubis?
What were they in?
I'm talking about Baphomet.
Never heard of them.
Yes, you have.
Wait, is that the demon thing that like?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if it's because my video on Baphomet has been getting a lot of views recently. I don't know how this happens, but weird old videos. It was done years ago, and I've been getting questions in regards to the deity of Baphomet. Let me just see what, for example.
Never even like worked with this entity before.
Okay, and that's what I want to address. Let me just find, I don't know why I exited out of my email when I still need it. Okay. The question is, they wanted to know about the deity Baphomet, and what's my personal take? How long have I worked with this deity? They thought it was a demon or a form of Satan or whatever. Okay. And I think
wait. I have something I want to say. Apparently, Baphomet is a deity of the Knights Templar who were accused of worshiping, and that was incorporated into the occult and mystical traditions. The name Baphomet appeared in trial transcripts for the Inquisition of the Knights Templar starting in 1307. First came into popular English usage in the 19th century, and there is a sigil for him. So apparently it is a deity.
Okay. It did, the image of Baphomet did not begin as a deity. So this would be a man-made deity. The image, and you can check out my video. I have a video on the Baphomet. It's an avatar. Baphomet is an avatar as I perceive it. It's an avatar of the cosmos. It is everything that is. It represents the balance of the cosmos. It represents the earth, the air, the fire, the water, with the wings and the horns and the hooves. The image of the goat, half man, is, and man and woman, the feminine and the masculine, the birth and the destruction. It's the moon, the sun, the stars, the earth. It is an avatar of everything. It's sitting in the position of the magician from the Rider Waite, as above, so below. It's taking from what is in the heavens, in the astral, in the ethereal, and manifesting it into the physical realm. So for me, it is a symbol of the cosmos. It is the power that a witch wields within their circle or their sacred space, the ability to create and manifest whatever it is I desire to do. And that is why the statue has a place on my altar. It's not a deity that I worship or honor. It is an avatar of all the complete cosmos, the powers of the witch. So I don't know why it's coming up, but I wanted to just clarify that here, that it's not a deity I worship. It's not a deity I honor. It's an avatar of everything. So
nothing to add other than what I read off of Wikipedia.
Let's see. I think deities come to you. Oh, yeah. Okay. Makey. I think deities come to you. I didn't know who Sarah Joanne was, but I kept dreaming about a woman stirring a cauldron, trying to give me a message. Eventually researched it and found Sarah Joanne. So that's a good question, Adam. Do you feel that individuals can choose a deity, or that deity chooses them? Because I've heard both.
I've heard both as well, and I've heard one argument over the other one more often, which is that Deity will always pick you. I've heard that the Morrigan will pick you, and I agree and disagree. So where I agree is in the Morrigan aspect, because when I was told to reach out to Astaroth, I wasn't then told to reach out to Morrigan. She just came afterwards and was like, "Hi, how are you? I know you're emotionally exhausted right now, but we're going to chat." And so I think in some instances it really depends. Sometimes Deity will come to you, and sometimes, like, what I do is I've reached out to the demons, right? And I've reached out to the saints before I started working with what we would consider an actual deity. So I don't know. I think it's dependent on your craft. Like, it sounds like for this person, Deity has picked them. To other people, they might reach out to Deity. I've heard people talk about reaching out to Hecate. I've also heard of people saying that you shouldn't reach out to Deity because they'll reach out to you. But I mean, it doesn't hurt to reach out. You're not offending anybody as long as you're doing it respectfully in some kind of way.
Yeah, I think it can go both ways too. I think, honestly, that the synchronicities of the universal source or deity, the big giant capital Deity, the big giant source where everything comes from, will shift things so that if you are meant to experience deity, you will, in the way that works best for you. Whether it's you reaching out or whether it's deity calling you. I've experienced, for me, it's always been a calling, but it doesn't mean that
it's been a calling from me. Like, when I started with Astaroth and the Morrigan, it became more of a calling, but towards the demon side. Like, you should reach out to this demon, or we want you to contact this demon to do this spell, right? So sometimes I'll be told to reach out to things, but in the case of the Morrigan, it was more of her reaching out to me. But I think it's also fair to caution that if you do reach out to another deity, that you should be respectful, right? You're not just going to be like, "Hey, I need you to do this. I don't know who you are or where you're from or anything about you, but I want you to do this." So, right, like, you'd want to do your research and, like, is this the right deity for you? You might have a feeling to go towards that deity, but you're also building a relationship. They're not just there to get you rent money for next month and then be on their way. Like, I think when people have a feeling that they want to reach out to a deity, or they have a deity that might be reaching out to them in some way, that there's a relationship that wants to be built there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for me, I think it starts out with how you perceive deity. I mean, the individual, whether you're a witch or magical practitioner or whatever, it's work from your perspective of what deity is, and then that will determine how to approach working or reaching out to a deity. If you are an individual who doesn't think deities are anything other than just energy, and that's it, it's just another energy, then your experience is going to be different than someone who perceives deity as more of a evolved or higher intelligence, or more that has more wisdom. That's going to be two different experiences. So I think it's important for the individual to understand their perception of who or what deity is. And then from there, that should dictate how you would approach working with a deity, whether you wait to be called or whether you go seek one out. You know what I mean? But I do think, regardless of how you approach it or how you perceive it, it's going to require effort on your part. Whether, even if you're waiting for a deity to call you, there's preparation for you to do with yourself in order to work with this deity. It's like preparing for a job interview or preparing to go to work for the first time. There's preparation. You know, do you get a new haircut? Do you get, a new wardrobe for this particular, occupation you're going to be doing? Do you need to get directions on how to get there? All this preparation. It's the same for the witch to prepare to work with or be ready to worship or honor a specific deity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lauren Morgana said that deities may change as we grow, and elevate depends on the sphere you're in. I do. I think that your experiences with deity, and even if you have a matron or patron that you're working with now, you may change, and that may not be your lifetime god or goddess that you work with. That could change as you change and evolve in your own craft. And
I mean, look at all the entities that I've worked with over the years of being on the Witchy Show.
Right. I mean, when I first began in witchcraft, I was brought up in a Roman Catholic household. So my gods were, God, and then I had Jesus and Mary. They were who I worked with. And we had saints. I had saints that I was connected with when I was Roman Catholic. And then shifting out of that, when I first practiced witchcraft or began my practice, I had a goddess, and it was Bast. And she was the one and only that I worked with for years, until I then started working with Isis, and then Thoth, and then Anubis, and then Danu and Cernunnos. And now I am where I am.
And for the longest time, it was nothing, just my energy. Then it was the spirits, then the saints, then the spirits, then Ashtaroth, then Morrigan, now the Morrigan and the spirits. And then there's demons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, spiritual entities. I have always had a familiar spirit. Spiritual entities, I've always worked with the beloved dead. When I was first starting and I was Wiccan, the watchtowers were a big part of my practice, along with the ancestors, and the ancestors are still a part of my practice. So is my familiar and working with the beloved dead, but no more specific deity, like I said, other than Mother Mary, if I need a personified divine feminine. Oh, okay. So yeah, we're supposed to be doing Q&A. So we've spent the first 45 minutes discussing deities, but Warren Peace has a question. Okay. What would your advice on it? Okay. What do you do when you're strong in your faith as a witch, but your entire family is Christian and constantly shames you for it?
Own your craft. Own your religion the same way that they own their religion. So, I mean, that's really the only thing you can do. And try to have civil conversations. I mean, sometimes when you get witches and Christians together, whether they're family or strangers, they'll get violent. And what I mean by violent is they'll get like heated words and arguments, right? But try to keep it civil and try to understand where they're coming from. Like if you grew up Christian, try to look back on what it is that you were taught that you may not agree with anymore, and see where they're coming from, and see if you can find some common ground, because there is common ground between witchcraft or Wicca or whatever it is that you practice and Christianity. There is a little bit of common ground there to at least start what I would consider, in relation to family, a healthy dialogue to kind of understand where they're coming from. Now, if they're just being bullies and just attacking you because they're, I don't know, maybe they're far-right extremist Christians or something, which I don't know your family, but if they're just attacking you and bullying you, then maybe distance yourself from them, right? You got to take care of yourself mentally and emotionally, and you don't want to be in those types of toxic, negative situations. But I guess my advice would be is A, try to have a conversation and find some common ground, or B, distance yourself from them.
I feel your pain. That's the first thing I can.
And that's the problem, is I don't, because I didn't grow up with a religious family.
I definitely feel your pain. I think it's important. Christianity is such a broad spectrum of, very broad area. I guess it would really depend on what specific type of Christianity your family practices, because I can tell you Roman Catholics practice a very different brand of Christianity than Jehovah's Witnesses do. But if your family is not as very open-minded, I mean, I had my best friend was Roman Catholic, but she definitely respected my beliefs, and she would come to me for advice, and she was always looking for a bridge between. I'm going to get upset. Anyway, so she would always
let it out, let it all out.
She would look for a bridge, where my parents are Roman Catholic and they never looked for a bridge. Okay. They're still practicing Roman Catholics. They see what I do as wrong, capital WRONG, wrong, because from their belief, if it isn't Christian, if I do not accept God, the Abrahamic God is my God, everything else is Satan. If it isn't Jesus, if it isn't God, if it isn't Mary, everything else is Satan. And that's their perspective. And I can't change their perspective. So what I do is, my parents and I don't talk about religion. If we talk about religion, it's their perspective that we're talking about. You know, if they want to talk about the sermon that the priest gave, then we talk about that as much as I'm able to, and then I'll end the conversation. I've stopped trying to fight them, to convince them that I'm not evil, because I realize I cannot convince them of that. From their perspective, I'm going to hell, and that's the end of it. You know, they've done wrong.
I think where a lot of people end up running into a brick wall when it comes to dealing with family who is very religious is that it's family, right? Like, you've grown up with these people, you don't want to lose these people. Sometimes in some situations, family may say it's either God or we're cutting you off because what you are or what you're doing is sinful. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's about your emotional and mental health. And if that's what's necessary for you to be able to grow and prosper as who you are as an individual today, then I say good riddance to them, right? Family isn't what you're born into, it's who you make it, right? I don't have a bloodline of family around me. I've got people that I consider family.
When they say this, when they say every person in our family is Christian except you, so who do you think is lost? I would say, I'm not lost. I'm not lost. There are billions of people in the world, and not everyone is Christian.
I would just end the conversation and be like, if that's how you feel, then that's how you feel. But I know in my heart of hearts that I'm not lost and I'm walking the path that's right for me. And then I would just change the subject. But if they continue to get hostile and continue to try and drag you back onto the subject, then just walk away from the conversation, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's really nothing, like, you can't change people, right? If they're going to be a certain way, they're going to be a certain way. The only thing you can do is change yourself and your situation, and you should never change for anybody else.
Yeah. You're not going to convince them that if this is what they think, there's no way you're going to be able to convince them otherwise, because they believe what they believe just as much as you believe what you believe, you know? I do want to, hey, Shadowlander, can an object become a servitor? You're muted, Adam.
Sorry, why is this comment green and not black like the other ones?
Because this individual paid $4.99.
Oh, that's what the $4.99 means? I've never seen this on StreamYard. I've seen, like, when I go live on YouTube, sometimes people will donate like a few pennies or whatever, and it'll pop up. And I get confused by that. Yeah,
that's what this is. I just added it to show up on the screen. So thank you, Shadowlander. An object become a servitor. Okay, here's my opinion. The object isn't the servitor. The object is the house or the home for the servitor. The vessel where your servitor is residing. It's taking a spirit and putting it into an object.
Or a thought form, because with spirits, you'd have to, in my opinion, and in my craft, with a spirit, you'd have to conjure the spirit or manifest the spirit, ask the spirit if it wants to live in this house. It'll usually tell you what kind of place it wants to live in. And then from there, right? But you could also do it with a thought form where you are creating this thought form and imbuing it into the object, which I guess is the same way.
Well, like I said, personally, a servitor is a thought form that I've constructed specifically to perform a service for me. So the spirit, the servitor is the spiritual construct that I've made on the astral plane. And it has a name, it has specific instructions that I've given it, and it's going to serve me, the witch, and it's going to do so at my beck and call. The object that I would house it in. So I would tell, for example, the servitor is going to, maybe it's going to walk the perimeter of my property, 5 times a day, to make sure that there are no stray or alien energies trying to invade my sacred space. And when it is not doing its duties that I've given it, it would then reside within the object. It would wait there, and then kind of like, I dream of Genie. The genie is in the bottle until, Master calls her out. Then the servitor goes out, does what I tell it to do, and then returns to its home. And then it goes out, does what that's.
What about the belief that some witches have around the fact that you have to feed the servitor? So they may want something, they may actually want a food item, or they may want a drink item, or they may want an incense or whatever.
Well,
or the fact that also sometimes, depending on how you treat your servitor, they can turn on you.
Okay. First of all, the servitor is under my control. So it will be fed what I tell it to be fed. It will do what I tell it to do. And from my perspective, the only way to take control of another individual's servitor is to know its name. And if the other witch knows the name of my servitor, then it can call it, and then it will sort of then answer to the other witch. Spirits are different, in my perspective, than servitors. Spirits are their own entity. They're not, a witch can control a spirit, but that takes more than if I've created it. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference there. Yeah. The spirit has its own will. The servitor is the will of me. I have given it my will in order to live. I birth it and I can destroy it. And another witch would have to destroy that, would have to overpower my will in order to destroy my servitor, unless it knows its name or has the key to control the servitor. That's different from my perspective. So an object itself could not become a servitor, because the servitor is an astral, it's a spiritual, it's an etherical entity. Whoops. Oh, that was Shadow Sun's comment. I'm just reading the other comments. Maybe it's a tool to focus thought form on when create. Oh, yeah, you could use an object to focus on to create a servitor. Okay. Is it possible to make one by accident? I think she's talking about a servitor.
A servitor requires you to actually be thinking about, this is what I want done, this is how I want it done, this is when it's going to be done, this is how many times it's going to be done. So I don't think it's possible for you to be like, I want a servitor that's going to walk my perimeter 6 times a day looking for black magic energy all around my place. Like, I don't think that's possible, but I mean, each to their own.
Yeah, I think, like earlier in the conversation, for me, there's a difference between a servitor and a thought form. Thought forms we can create unconsciously, unintentionally. It's a thought that we've given emotional energy to. We do that. I mean, at least I do that quite often. I'm an emotional person. I start crying at certain things. I've created a thought form, but I haven't specifically given that thought form an intention or instructions. A servitor is something, as Adam said, you go to the astral plane, you put in concentration and focus. There's ways to create the servitor that needs to be done with intention. So I agree. I personally don't believe you can accidentally create a servitor.
We create thought forms all the time, though. I mean, if you think about it, I could go even further back and say in the Dancing of Demons series, we talked about this concept of bringing, like, how nothing in reality really exists until we think about it and then it manifests type of thing. It's really high level stuff. But anyways, that's kind of like a thought form. We create them all the time, every day.
Yeah. You can create a servitor with an emergency destruction button. You certainly can create that into your servitor. There is also a suggestion that servitors are generally something you do for a short period of time, because as Adam brought up, you need to feed the servitor energy, because it needs to have the ability to perpetually carry out your service. And if you neglect it, that energy will erode, and it has the potential to become chaotic and undirected. It's sort of like, giving someone a task, and you give them a task, and if you don't check up on them, if they're bored of that task, they're just going to stop doing it. If they haven't eaten or slept or drank water, they're going to die. They need attention.
If you want to create a servitor that's longer term, you can do it where you end up feeding them monthly. Mm-hmm. And that just in my craft, when I try to create a servitor that lasts for an extended period of time that gets fed monthly, it's a lot of energy.
Yeah, I agree. You definitely can create like batteries and things like that when you're going to create your servitor. It's creating a servitor is really limitless, and it's only the witch's limitations that really are in play there. So I have a couple of long-term servitors, but they do require attention. I mean, I don't attend to them every week, probably like every other week, but they still require attention. They still require energy to be fed to keep that momentum of the intention going. And we've come to our hour.
Okay.
We have.
I mean, we could just keep going, but okay.
No, I cannot keep going. I have an appointment I have to get to. So what? We covered deities, servitors, and we talked about Warren Peace's question about Christianity. I think that's what we covered, right? Yeah. Deity was the first 45 minutes. Well, thank you all for joining us. Yay. I think my next live is already scheduled, I believe. Let me take a look. Yes, the next live is going to be Saturday, January 30th at 6 p.m. And it's the live that I was supposed to do with Jasmine. We've rescheduled it for that day. And I think we're talking about our duty as witches. I think that's what we have scheduled to talk about. And then Adam and I will have to come on again sometime in February. So
that's when the witchy show boots up again. Okay.
Ooh, yay. So in the meantime, go check out Adam's channel and check out my backlog of videos, and mark your calendar for January 30th. It'll be in the evening. It's 6 p.m. Pacific time. So I don't know, do the math for anybody. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Love you all. Bye. Blessed be.